They say lightning never strikes twice unless you're Karen and you keep plugging your $90.00 K Tesla into someone else's solar grid like it's a community soda machine. At 3:07 a.m., she found out the hard way that my do not touch sign wasn't decorative. It was a prophecy. The charger popped, the lawn lit up like the 4th of July, having a nervous breakdown, and Karen screamed like Alexa just turned on her conscience. Sparks flew, mulch smoked, and somewhere in the distance, an owl reconsidered its life choices. That's when I knew this wasn't a neighborly dispute. This was electrical warfare. At 3:07 a.m., my entire barn lit up like a Christmas rave. The surge alarm from my off-grid console screamed into the silence like a rabid microwave having a meltdown. I jolted upright, heart slamming like a loose wrench in a dryer, and for one brief moment I genuinely thought a raccoon had shorted the inverter again. But the readout didn't lie. A 13.4 kW spike slamming into the system from one of my exterior ports. That's nearly 4 times what the chicken coop's veneer monitors and my security lighting combined would ever draw at night. Unless my geese had figured out cryptocurrency mining, someone was stealing my power. I threw on a hoodie, grabbed my flashlight, and stomped out into the cold, like a man about to catch a ghost. And there she was, a gleaming white Tesla Model Y parked like a smug spaceship beneath the moonlight, plugged neatly into my private charging port as if the universe owed her a top-up. Standing next to it, arms folded like a DMV boss on her day off, was Karen. The Karen, our HOA treasurer and self-declared standards enforcer, complete with clipboard temper and a voice that could shatter ceramic. She met my eyes and said, "Oh, don't give me that look. Your charger was just sitting there. It's not like I'm stealing." Her tone made it sound like she was borrowing a lawn chair, not hijacking a privately engineered solar grid. Then she actually added, "It's just electricity. Don't be selfish." Now, context matters. I built that solar system myself. Every panel, every line, every voltage controller. It wasn't just power. It was principle. It ran my ranch, my tech shed, my backup well pump. It was independence, born from years of corporate grid headaches and HOA fines about visible panels. And here was this woman who once threatened me with a violation letter because my battery housing was too masculine in color, now helping herself to my electrons like it was a neighborly bake sale. I tried to stay calm. "Karen, this is a private system. You can't just..." She cut me off with a smile that reeked of entitlement. "Relax, Nate. We're in the same community. That makes it community power, right?" Her logic had the structural integrity of a marshmallow truss. I walked back inside before I said something regrettable, sat down at the console and pulled up the logs. Her Tesla had already drawn 62% capacity in the past 5 hours, putting visible strain on my lower battery bank. Then I checked the timestamps. There was another draw last Thursday and one on Monday and the Saturday before that. My brow furrowed as I opened the surveillance feed from the driveway cam. There she was, sneaking in at 2:48 a.m., hoodie up, cable in hand, humming to herself as she leached off my grid like it was a community potluck. Not once, not twice, 5 different nights. My finger hovered over the pause button as I stared at the frozen frame. Karen, framed in night vision, her face glowing with smugness, casually sipping from a metal thermos as her Tesla hummed off my bowls. The worst part? She didn't look like a thief. She looked entitled to it. And that was the moment I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a pattern, a war, a voltage vendetta waiting to happen. I stared at that night vision freeze frame of Karen like it was the Mona Lisa of delusion, her smug little face glowing faintly in green light, holding my charging cable like it came with the HOA welcome basket. But here's the thing. This wasn't her first boundary violation. No, this was just the latest act in a long-running off-Broadway production called Karen Gets Drunk on Power. And it all started the day she got herself elected HOA treasurer, not because anyone trusted her, but because literally no one else showed up. That was Red Brick Township in a nutshell. Small, scenic, sleepy. Our version of utopia came with vineyards, chickens, and the illusion of privacy. Until she got her clipboard. Moved out here 8 years ago, half to get away from the city and half to prove a point. I just cashed out of my tech job and decided to go full retired engineer with a vendetta against power companies. I bought 4 acres on the edge of Red Brook, built a micro ranch, and turned my property into a clean energy fortress. Solar panels on the barn roof, smart batteries, and a weather-sealed shed. Even the goat shelter ran off an inverter system. I had just installed it, a custom design. My grid wasn't a luxury, it was my autonomy. And the HOA hated that, especially Karen. Her first strike came the day I painted my battery housing dark slate gray. She showed up unannounced in a collared polo with O standard stitched where a name tag should be and said, "That color's not on the approved exterior palette." I told her the palette didn't apply to solar enclosures and handed her a copy of the city permit. She looked like I'd handed her a spider. "Well, it's visually aggressive," she said. I almost asked her what shade visually aggressive was on the color wheel. Instead, I told her politely to leave. That week, I got my first official violation notice for unauthorized vertical structures adjacent to property lines. It was the battery casing, not even 6 feet tall. Again, fully permitted. I fought that nonsense with paperwork, won, and thought that was the end of it. But Karen doesn't retreat. She adapts. By year 2, she'd elevated herself from glorified checkbook manager to self-appointed executive officer of community integrity. No one voted on it. She just changed her email signature. Suddenly, we had newsletters about acceptable lawn geometries and vigilant parking surveillance. One poor guy down the road got fined because his American flag touched a flower box. But what got me the most wasn't her new rules. It was how she treated community like a bank account she could withdraw from whenever it suited her. My grid, free energy. My fence, shared visual space. My grapes, invasive landscaping. She had this mantra she kept repeating every time someone pushed back. "We're not individuals, we're a collective." She said it like she'd been reading HOA manifestos at 2 a.m. And the problem was, some people bought into it, or at least kept their heads down. No one wanted to fight. They just wanted their lawn to pass inspection and their mail not to come with fines. But I wasn't wired that way. I didn't move to the middle of nowhere to play pretend government with a woman who thought HOA meetings were constitutional conventions. So, when I saw her on camera, again siphoning off my power like she was topping off a mug of community soup, I didn't just get mad, I got focused. Because now, this wasn't just about electricity. It was about boundaries. Mine. And how she kept crossing them with the confidence of someone who truly believed the sun belonged to her. What she didn't know, what she never stopped to consider, was that I wasn't the kind of neighbor who fought fire with fire. I fought it with schematics, and I'd already started drawing. By sunrise, I had 5 gigs of footage, 6 pages of system logs, and a thermos full of coffee that tasted like revenge. I didn't go to her house in anger, I went in clarity. I'd knocked like a man about to read a deposition. And Karen opened the door, wearing a silk robe, a Bluetooth headset, and a face that screamed, "You're wasting my morning." I held up the folder. "This is everything you've taken from my grid without permission. If you stop now, I'll drop it. Just reimburse a portion, and it ends here." She blinked once, then actually laughed. "You're hoarding energy," she said, like I was sitting on barrels of sunshine like some solar dragon. "This is environmental gatekeeping." I stared at her. She sipped from her glass mug like she was in a TED Talk. "You put a charger on the outside of your barn. It wasn't marked, it wasn't locked. That's called implied access." I was about to ask if she'd also walk into someone's unlocked garage and borrow a lawnmower when she added, "Besides, we're a part of a green community. What you're doing is exclusionary." The words landed like confetti made of nonsense. I turned around without another word, but I knew what was coming. She wasn't going to let it go. Sure enough, 3 days later, I opened my mailbox to find a brand new HOA violation notice tucked between the water bill and a coupon for pest control. The charge? Operating a non-standardized energy distribution system without community integration compliance. I read it twice, just to confirm that, yes, someone had weaponized the phrase community integration to describe theft. I didn't yell, I didn't rage, I built folders. Video stills, timestamps, log exports. I synced my security cams to offsite backups, created spreadsheets with power usage deltas, and added tags like unauthorized entry, hoodie edition. I built it like a litigation package because that's what this was becoming. Karen had escalated from passive-aggressive HOA tyrant to full-on power pirate with a victim complex. And she wasn't done. I overheard her at the community garden. Yes, she frequented the basil patch like it was her throne, talking to Diane from the board. He's been hoarding solar for months. You know, he has enough to power a whole street. It's unfair. It's un-American. Un-Americaner. That was new. I made a mental note to add that to the list of phrases Karen used incorrectly. What made it worse was Diane nodded, not with agreement, but with exhaustion, the kind that comes from being looped into HOA drama against your will. I considered confronting her again, maybe calmly laying it all out with diagrams, maybe reminding her that my system had been cleared with both city inspectors and fire code. But Karen wasn't looking for facts. She was building a narrative. And that narrative didn't include logic. It included buzzwords like equity and grid, justice, all dressed up to excuse plugging a luxury SUV into someone else's solar array. And then came the kicker. During HO movie night, family-friendly flick, lawn chairs on the rec field, popcorn and compostable bags. Karen stood up in front of 24 neighbors and said, if Nate Holloway thinks he can isolate himself from the rest of us and hoard energy, maybe it's time the public hears about it. She didn't say my name like an insult. She said it like a threat. I smiled because if she wanted attention, he was about to get it, but maybe not the kind she expected. Karen wanted attention, so I gave her a stage. The kind with wiring, circuit traps, and a front row seat to reality. See, I wasn't just some guy with panels. I was a systems engineer with a minor, and don't mess with me. That weekend, I got to work building the dummy port a decoy charger that looked identical to the real one, only this one was hardwired to a relay that looped through a surge cascade. Nothing lethal, nothing that'd cause injury, but just enough to fry the charging cable and maybe her smug sense of invincibility. The voltage was within safety thresholds. Technical gray area, but legally sound. As a bonus, I added a laminated sign above the panel. Play grid, do not access surge risk. Big, bold, bright yellow. I figured even Karen's ego couldn't ignore that. But then again, she never saw a boundary she didn't want to cross. I placed the decoy right next to the actual port, rigged with a small current sensor that would alert me the second someone plugged into it. Then I waited. It took all of 3 nights. At 1:42 a.m., my system pinged, load detected, decoy port. I leaned back in my chair, pulled up the security cam, and there she was, moving through the shadows like a Dollar Tree cat burglar. Hoodie up, pajama pants flapping, thermos in hand. She crouched by the outlet and hummed a little tune and plugged in like she was charging the Ark of the Covenant. 10 seconds later, pop! A flash of sparks lit up the night like someone had dropped a 4th of July party into a toaster. Karen screamed like Oscar nomination scream, stumbled backward and fell right onto her lawn, flailing in disbelief. Her Tesla's charger port hissed, then went dark, smoke curling from the connection like a dying campfire. She sat there for a few stunned seconds before scrambling to her feet, clutching her phone and yelling into the void, "It's broken! What the hell did he do?" The footage was glorious, every frame. High definition, night vision, multiple angles. Honestly, it was better than most reality TV. I clipped the video and stored it in 3 cloud drives before the sun came up. But the real magic didn't happen until 2 teenagers down the street, Tyler and Mikey, got a hold of the footage. I didn't give it to them. I suspect one of them had tapped into the neighborhood mesh cam system or got it from a Discord leak. Either way, they edited it like pros. Dramatic sound effects, slow-mo reaction, added subtitles like shocked into reality and Zap Queen gets fried. They uploaded it to TikTok and YouTube under the title, "When You Try to Steal Sunshine and the Sun Fights Back." By Tuesday, it had 1.3 million views. By Thursday, it was on Reddit's front page under r/public freakout. I should have been mad. I wasn't. I was sipping tea on the porch, watching a UPS driver chuckle at his phone before glancing up at Karen's house. And if going viral taught her anything, it didn't show. She doubled down, of course. Told people it was sabotage, claimed I had set a dangerous neighborhood trap, that I'd weaponized solar energy. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The footage had done all the talking, and behind the scenes, I was already prepping for phase 2. Because Karen wasn't finished. She hadn't hit bottom yet. But she was digging. By Friday morning, the neighborhood buzzed like a power grid in a storm. Karen's Tesla sat limp in her driveway, the charred Charger dangling like a burned-out tail. I was mid-sip on my coffee when the knock came. Hard, fast, angry, like someone pounding a moral gavel on my front door. I opened it to find Karen flanked by two HOA board members, Leonard, a retired CPA with orthopedic sandals and the spine of a breadstick, and Diane, the neighborhood's unofficial mediator who always looked like she regretted joining anything with bylaws. Karen didn't wait. "You sabotaged my car," she snapped, nostrils flaring like she was about to charge the porch. "That was a criminal act." Her voice cracked halfway through the word criminal, which added a certain opera drama flair. Leonard stepped forward, clearing his throat like it might summon courage. "We just want to have a civil conversation about what happened." I nodded politely and told them to wait. A minute later, I returned with a folder, thick, tabbed, indexed, and probably enough to qualify as a novella in the true crime section. I handed it to Leonard. "That's every instance Karen plugged into my system without permission. Each one includes timestamps, security footage, and battery draw logs." Karen lunged and snatched one of the papers. "This proves nothing," she barked. "The Charger was outside. There were no locks or signs until after I used it." I pointed to the surveillance camera over the barn and calmly added, "There's audio, including the time you said, and I quote, 'I figured I'd save a few bucks.'" Anne winced like someone had just stepped on a grape with their bare foot. Leonard blinked at the growing stack of evidence as if it were a subpoena in motion. But Karen? She doubled down like a gambler who thought yelling made her odds better. "I'm filing an HOA complaint for sabotage," she said. "You deliberately installed a trap. You caused damage to my property." I shrugged. "You trespassed, repeatedly. Despite posted warnings, you used a private port after being told not to. And you initiated power transfer on a decoy system clearly labeled. What happened wasn't sabotage, it was consequence." They left in silence. Karen's heels clicked down my walkway like gunshots. But I knew she wasn't done. That afternoon, my attorney, an old college buddy named Will, who now specialized in property law and HOA disputes, sent a cease and desist letter to both Karen and the HOA board. It was clean, clear, and lethal. Trespassing, unauthorized use of private infrastructure, attempted defamation, all backed by digital evidence and system logs. It wasn't a threat. It was a roadmap to civil court. I printed a copy and framed it in the garage for fun. But apparently, Karen didn't respond well to paper. That very night, less than 24 hours after receiving a formal legal warning, she came back. I was reviewing motion sensor data when the alert pinged. Backyard, 246 IM. I pulled up the feed and froze. There she was, dressed in black from hoodie to sneakers, crouched beside my main control panel like she was auditioning for Mission Impossibly Dumb. She had a tiny screwdriver and was fumbling with the tamper-proof casing. No gloves, no mask, just unfiltered HOA entitlement. She cursed under her breath when the tool slipped and right before leaving flipped off the security camera like it was my face. And I didn't say a word, I just saved the file and smiled, because if she thought that was her final move, she had no idea what I'd built next. After the emergency meeting, you'd think Karen would have taken the L and retreated into her house like a scorched porcupine. But if losing her title of HOA treasurer stung, she didn't show it. In fact, she seemed more determined than ever to prove the world still revolved around her clipboard. She stopped speaking at board functions, but she didn't stop watching. You could feel her gaze through closed blinds, judging every lawn, every mailbox, and definitely every solar watt my system produced. I tightened security, updated my motion sensors, and added a backup server just in case she had any midnight accidents planned. Because with Karen, quiet wasn't peace. It was the prelude to stupidity. That prelude came during the neighborhood's weekly outdoor movie night. Lawn chairs, blankets, popcorn, the whole thing. Halfway through the Goonies, the projector flickered and died. Popcorn machine sputtered. All lights off. A transformer had blown on the main grid. The entire block went dark, except one house, mine. My place glowed like a Christmas card. Porch lights, fans spinning, even my garden lights were twinkling like smug little fireflies. I could feel the eyes turning. Most folks nodded in appreciation. Some whispered, but Karen stood right up, arms flailing like she was conducting an invisible orchestra of outrage. "See? He's hoarding power again, while the rest of us sit in the dark. He's living like a king." Someone from the crowd muttered, "He built that system himself." Another added, "Maybe the HOA should have invested in solar instead of lawn paint." The crowd chuckled. Karen turned beet red. She tried to rally support, but the winds had shifted. Her power, like her Tesla's charger, was fried. I didn't say a word. I just stood, gave her a polite wave, and walked back to my fully lit home. And that, apparently, was the final insult she couldn't swallow. The next morning, my motion sensor trip at 6:03 a.m., I was already sipping coffee, so I pulled up the feed. There she was, in a bathrobe and yard clogs, holding a pair of bright orange gardening shears like she was about to prune vengeance itself. She crouched near the solar array fence and reached toward a cable. My external sensor line, not power, just data, clearly labeled. That didn't stop her. She snipped it clean, and the moment she did, a 120 decibel air horn mounted just above the panel screamed to life. She screamed louder, fell backward into a pile of mulch, arms flailing, mouth open, like she'd just been ghost-pecked by Benjamin Franklin himself. I stepped outside, phone recording, deadpan calm. "Trimming weeds?" I asked. She was brushing dirt off her arms, trying to look dignified while sitting in compost. "You have invasive growth along the fence," she snapped, breathless. I pointed to the labeled cable and said, "That's a sensor line. Touch it again and I'll add criminal tampering to your rap sheet." She stormed off, clog squishing, but I wasn't done. That afternoon, I filed a formal restraining order, trespassing, tampering, repeated violations. My lawyer submitted the footage, log reports, and a printout of the HOA suspension documentation. Then we moved forward with a civil suit for property damage and attempted sabotage. I wasn't just ending this, I was closing the circuit. But while I was filing legal paperwork, something else was brewing quietly. Something I hadn't expected, something that would give Karen a taste of poetic justice and give me the perfect opportunity to deliver the final blow publicly. The restraining order was granted without a hiccup. The judge barely blinked once he saw the video of Karen snipping a label cable in house shoes and a bathrobe. The terms were clean and simple: no more stepping on my property, no more messing with my system, and absolutely no unauthorized garden shears near my infrastructure. She didn't even show up to the hearing. Word was she'd gone quiet again, holed up in her house, shades drawn, lawn neglected, as if trying to disappear into her own HOA violation. But while she sulked, something unexpected began to take shape. Neighbors started knocking on my door, not to complain, but to ask questions. People wanted to know how my system worked, how I stayed on during blackouts, what they could do to build something similar. Apparently, the viral Zap Queen saga had turned my house into a minor legend around Red Brook. Kids were sneaking selfies near the charger decoy. Someone even left a solar-powered gnome on my porch with a note, "Respect the current." But I wasn't interested in fame. I was interested in change. So when the HOA board invited me to speak at the quarterly policy meeting, I showed up with a proposal in hand: the energy boundary and solar education policy. I kept the tone professional, no sarcasm, no power puns, just clarity. I explained how private off-grid systems worked, how boundary violations could lead to danger and liability, and how the HOA's outdated standards had left room for abuse. I recommended new language in the bylaws, explicit protections for private energy infrastructure, signage requirements, legal recourse procedures, and educational workshops for residents interested in renewable systems. The real twist? I also recommended the HOA set-aside budget to invest in a community microgrid project, something small, scalable, and smart. I offered to consult pro bono. There was a pause after I finished. Then Diane clapped, Leonard followed. The vote wasn't even close. The board approved the motion and agreed to allocate funding for the community system. Just like that, the same HOA that once fined me for aesthetically aggressive solar panels was now asking for my advice on where to mount inverters. And Karen? She was nowhere in sight. Her driveway stayed empty. Her Tesla had been towed weeks ago. Her house, once the command center of clipboard tyranny, now stood quiet, with a for sale sign leaning slightly crooked on the lawn. She never sent a goodbye email, just vanished. But she didn't leave empty-handed. One last legacy remained. After clearing out her garage, movers had left her melted Tesla charging cable on the curb. Scorched, twisted, and oddly poetic. I scooped it up, cleaned it, and mounted it in a clear acrylic shadow box. Below it, I engraved a small metal plaque that read, "The relic of entitlement. Tamper with the sun, get burned." I installed it right next to the dummy port, under the live status screen of my solar grid. It became a minor attraction. People walking by would stop, take photos, shake their heads. Some laughed, others asked questions. Kids gave it nicknames. Tyler from across the street called it the Zap Trap Trope. One Saturday, as I was sweeping the porch, I heard a little boy's voice. "Hey, Dad," he said, pointing to the box. "What's that?" The dad looked down, then back at me and smiled. "That, buddy, is what happens when you charge without asking." I nodded and went back to sweeping. The sun gleaming off the panels above me like a quiet high five from the universe. Redbrook had changed. People were talking more, cooperating more, even asking the HOA board to review other outdated policies. I was no longer the crazy engineer with too many wires. I was the guy who proved that boundaries, when respected, kept communities brighter. But even as peace settled across the block, I wasn't quite done. In my workshop, something new was in the works. Another system, a backup to the backup, and maybe, just maybe, a feature designed to automatically identify and redirect unauthorized leaches. Because if there's one thing Karen taught me, it's this: entitlement doesn't have an off switch. It just finds another outlet. In a world where entitlement often hides behind fake authority and HOA titles, knowing your boundaries and defending them smartly isn't petty. It's necessary. Nate didn't fight back with anger. He fought back with facts, footage, and the kind of clever planning that made justice feel earned, not just served. This wasn't just about solar panels. It was about standing your ground when someone thinks your hard work is theirs to exploit. And maybe, just maybe, it was about turning a melted charger into a community symbol. Respect isn't automatic. It's powered by accountability. If you enjoyed watching Karen get fried, figuratively, of course, drop a comment below with your favorite moment. Was it the mulch dive or the dummy port explosion? Hit like. Share the story with someone who's ever dealt with HOA madness. And don't forget to subscribe, because there's always another Karen just waiting to short circuit.